just a couple of weeks ago, I was kicking off NAFQ's annual conference in Long Beach with a general session for over 800 executives. And the night before, I was sitting at the bar by myself and wrapping up a few thoughts for my session the next day when I overheard the conversation of two gentlemen. They were sitting next to me. Their names were Phil and Jerry. I'm going to remember Phil and Jerry for the rest of my life. Both of them were in their early 80s. One had served on their board of directors at their credit union for over 50 years. The other one had been serving for about 25 years. And I heard them talking, and I kindly asked them, I said, would you mind if I could join your conversation? And they were so kind to oblige, and they turned their chairs and invited me into the discussion. It was one of the best conversations that I have ever had because I learned so much from them in that hour and a half. We talked about all different areas of life. And the one thing that struck me was where their minds were back in 1994, because they shared with me, they were very open, they were very honest, that in 1994, 95, 96, the idea of the internet, they were scoffing at, they were laughing at. They recalled and they remembered sitting in board meetings thinking about how dumb this whole internet thing was and why online banking was a waste of time and mobile banking would never work. They both look back though now and they laugh. They laugh about how wrong they were. And Jerry, he even grabbed his iPhone and he said, whoever thought that I would be walking around with one of these things, yet know how to use it or even log into my credit union's online banking, my mobile banking. And this reminds me of another interview on YouTube with Russ Solomon. Russ was the founder of Tower Records, and he was reflecting on the rise and fall of his company and how the music industry turned their back on the kids because the music industry they did not understand the transformations that were happening in regards to technology, driving human behavior in regards to how people listened and consumed to music. Let's listen to what Russ has to say here.
And we knew that it was affecting, through the free downloading, the Napster phenomena, the Kazaa, and all the rest of them, you could see that was affecting the music business somewhat. But you're dealing with a couple of forces there that were going against each other. You have on one hand a free downloading environment where kids could get the music free. You have on the other hand the record companies withdrawing singles from the market, so kids couldn't buy singles at all at any price, and the record companies through the years raising prices accordingly and making it impossible to buy just a song. And if you wanted a song, you had to buy a whole album. There was a tremendous resistance to that on the part of the kids. But the general increase in pricing through the years as time went on against a market that was slightly slipping just affected the overall industry. But I think the biggest mistake that the industry made was really turning their backs on the kids. They lost a generation. They didn't look to the future, that the kids are the future. They always are, particularly in a business like the music business. But they turned their backs on the kids, and today, and over an evolving last almost 5 or 10 years, you might say, there's very little for kids to buy in music stores. As a result, kids don't go in, so now you got a big slippage.
I want to come back to one of the points that Russ just shared. The biggest mistake the music industry made was turning their backs on the kids. They didn't look to the future. The kids are the future. And I'd add to this thought that the biggest mistake that the music industry made, it was not just turning their back on the kids, but it was also turning their backs on technology, to not learn and understand how new technology was transforming human behavior. So I want to come back and share just a bit more of this interview with Russ with you, because he continues to share his perspective about why his thoughts, his beliefs, his perspective, his context and framing, why shopping in store was better than shopping online. Let's come back to Russ.
Strangely enough, it's a lot more fun to shop in a record store, or in any store for that matter, than to shop online. And we were the first ones, believe it or not, to sell records online back in 1994. But even today, which is into the digital world, buying stuff online and downloading music and video and so on online, it's not the same. It's not the same as picking it up in your hand and taking it home, looking at it, listening to it, and then putting it on the shelf and having it as a possession.
I know that's true for me and you. I just wonder because, I go around talking to all the young people and students, and it seems like everybody is doing the download thing, and they're subscribing to services like Napster, or they're downloading off Kazan, like you said. And I'm just wondering if it's an era that's sort of passing now, where we're shifting to this new kind of reality.
I get really criticized when I say this, but there's a fad element to what's going on right now with this technology. It'll burn out a little bit, and people will want objects. They really will.
So let's come back, because when you hear Russ's thoughts, it's his own personal bias. It's a perspective, his context, and his framing that clouded his judgment. You have to remember, Russ founded Tower Records in 1960 when the world was very different. He was very successful for sure, but he failed to let go of what he knew. He failed to reinvent himself so that he could reinvent Tower Records for a new world with a new type of consumer, with new technologies. And hearing Russ's thinking reminds me of the Kodak story that I shared in my book, Banking on Digital Growth. For it was Kodak that had invented the very first digital camera prototype all the way back in 1975. And Russ even mentions that Tower Records was one of the very first to sell CDs online in 1994, which was the dawn of the internet. But Russ believed that this was going to just be a fad element, he said, to what was going on at the time with Napster and Kazaa and iPods. And this was even before the music industry started streaming with platforms like Pandora and Spotify. So in hindsight, did the downloading of music, that fad, did that ever burn out? Of course not. It's this type of thinking, though, that Russ had as to why Tower Records, which once again, it was founded in 1960, it didn't make it. And they eventually closed shop and filed for bankruptcy in 2006. So just like Russ, it's also this type of thinking. Not AI. It's this type of thinking that I see as one of the greatest threats to financial brands in the age of AI. Consider that, according to the FDIC, in 1994, at the dawn of the internet, there were 10,453 commercial banks in the United States. And at the end of 2022, that number dropped to 4,136. On the credit union side of things, in 2000, there were 10,316 credit unions in the United States, and that number dropped to 5,288 by the end of 2022. History is repeating itself once again, particularly now that we've entered into the age of AI. And we're seeing CEOs, marketing teams, sales teams, leadership teams not investing time to learn how new technologies like AI are transforming human behavior once more. They're not investing time to mind their mind. They're not investing time to mind their mindset. So many of them, they're just stuck doing work in the present moment. And as I've shared many times before on this podcast, doing is the most dangerous place to be in the age of AI. This is why you must create intentional space, intentional time to break free from what you're doing, to review, to learn, to think about how you can do even better at least once every 90 days. This is the core principle that we teach in the 90-day growth method here at the Digital Growth Institute. And thinking about this once again, thinking about Russ, perhaps there's even an opportunity for you, for your team as leaders, to reinvent yourselves so that you can continue to reinvent your organizations for a new consumer with new technologies. It's because in our industry, when you start talking about automation, data, AI, your new teammate, as I mentioned before, Ada, one of two things happens. Either people get really, really excited, or they get really timid, scared, and frightened. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of change that holds so many back. One of the top questions I get from marketing teams and sales teams specifically when it comes to AI and automation is my job safe? People want to know whether or not they're going to be replaced by a robot. What I tell them is, first of all, just turn off the news. Because when we hear about this automation, when we hear about AI in the news, it's almost fear-mongering. And we know why that is. It's because it's the news, and the news is designed to play into our fears. That's what keeps our attention. It's one of the reasons that I often question, and I ask myself, but I ask others to ask themselves, what are you paying attention to? That's that word, paying. What are you paying attention to? What are you getting in return? Because the truth about automation, data, and AI, it's way more nuanced than what you hear in the media. Think about where we were in 1994. The same conversation was happening. Jobs were going to be lost. But now, no, new jobs were created because of the internet. Same thing is going to happen now when it comes to automation and data and AI. New jobs will be created. There's so much we can't even begin to fathom. And that's where it's like, focus on the mind, master the mind, master the mindset. Because whether you're coming at this from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, a leadership perspective, there are opportunities to feel excited, to feel energized when you think about your new teammate, ADA, automation, data, and AI. I truly do believe that your best days are still ahead of you. But you have to believe this too. And this is why you must master your mindset. This is why you must mind your mindset. This is why your mind is, in fact, the most important technology to master in the age of AI, because your mindset is going to directly impact your future growth potential. It's your financial brand. And this is a reason that we developed the Future Growth Index here at the Digital Growth Institute, because we needed a way to start measuring the mindsets of leaders and their teams, framed around their perspective of future, the future at a global level, the future at an organizational level, the future at a team level. Because how you perceive the future right now in the present moment is going to directly influence your decisions and your actions going forward into the future as a leader, as a team, as an organization.